Hello, thank you for joining Craig's Gun Channel this week. This week I thought we would talk about the topic of bullet drop. Now, what exactly is bullet drop? Well, I'm going to show you. I have an experiment. This is a common bullet. It's a .30 caliber, just a plain full metal jacket bullet, and we're going to do a little experiment. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Well, when I dropped it, it fell straight down. Now, that shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. It's due to a little thing we call gravity, and essentially what happens is it just falls straight down. Now, the part that people many times don't realize is that when you fire a weapon, as soon as the bullet leaves the barrel, it starts to drop at the exact same rate as if you just dropped it. Now, of course, the difference being, when you just drop it, it falls straight down. When you fire it from a gun, in that same amount of time it takes the bullet to drop to the ground, it may have traveled 2,000 or 3,000 feet, or maybe even a little bit farther, depending on the velocity of the bullet. So, why is this important? Well, it's important because when you're aiming at a target, you need to know what the range is or the distance. Or, in other words, when you're sighting your firearm in, you need to know at what point the zero is. Now, the 0 point is the point at which your line of sight, when you're looking down the sights, meets the same point as the trajectory of the bullet. So let's look at this a little bit different. Many people think that when you fire a rifle, that the bullet shoots out of the barrel and heads straight to the target like a laser. Well, that really isn't the case. Because of that bullet drop, the sights have to be calibrated and adjusted in such a way to account for that drop. So essentially, you have to shoot the bullet above what you're actually aiming at. And then that drop will come in and it will arc down and hit the target. So at distance, you will zero your firearm in so that your line of sight and your target will be at the same point. Now, with a longer range rifle, and by longer range, that's relative, it can be 100 yards or longer, the bullet itself will cross the line of sight generally 2 times. There will be a near zero, where the bullet crosses the line of sight, and the far zero, where the bullet crosses the line of sight. And that far zero is generally then aligned to be where your target is at. So say you sight your rifle in for 100 yards. Your far zero will be 100 yards away, so where you're aiming and where the bullet drops will be at the same point at 100 yards. Generally speaking, at around 40 or 50 yards, your bullet on its upward travel will cross the line of sight, and that's called the near zero. So there's actually 2 0 points with most setups on rifles. There's the near zero and the far zero. Now, the bullet leaving the barrel will be going up, so it's below the line of sight until it reaches that near zero. Then it will go above the line of sight until it arcs back down to hit the far zero. Now, once it hits that far zero, it just continues to drop and is no longer within the line of sight at all. So some, like rifle scopes, they'll have little lines or dots below the crosshair, and those can be in either in minutes of angle or mil dots. There's a couple different terms and types of setups. And what those do is allow you, if you know that the range is farther than what you have the scope sighted in for, you can adjust by lifting up and aligning with one of those other dots. And all of this is taken into account. It's with ballistic tables. There's a lot of math involved, and usually people just use software these days, either on a computer or on like a smartphone. And you enter in all the variables, such as the air temperature, the velocity of the bullet, the shape of the bullet, the height of the sights over the barrel or the bore. And you plug all of that in, and it will give you a result telling you at various ranges how far above or below the bullet will be to the line of sight. And then you use that to adjust your sights accordingly. Now, this particular item, the bullet drop, is the hardest one to master for when you're shooting and aiming, especially at longer ranges. The left to right, or what's called windage, that's a lot easier. You have to account for wind, but generally speaking, that's a little bit easier to account for, and it's the bullet drop that most people have the trouble with. So I hope this has helped you a little bit so that you understand kind of how the process works as far as the trajectory of the bullet. It's one of the things that it's one of the hardest ones to master, but once you do master it, your ability to be able to shoot, especially at longer ranges, will be very much enhanced. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And as always, please be safe, and we'll see you next week.